Good morning, everybody. It's a huge pleasure for me to be here, and thank you very much for the invitation to do so. Well, let's start a bit further up in the presentation, shall we? So, I've been allowed to come here today to talk about artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is a hard topic to talk about, to be fair, because there's a lot to cover. Do you choose the technology? Do you choose what it might mean to us, for societies and for individuals? I'm going to give you a quick kind of whisk through. So I've decided on a title called Machines, Politics and Morality, because I wanted to touch a little bit on the AI itself, but in a non-technical way, and then go into what it might mean for society and for us. So I hope you'll join me on that journey. So let's start with the machines, with the AI itself. Now, I'm not going to do a kind of long technical about the newest inventions, etc. in AI, be that in machine vision or in language understanding, etc., or self-driving cars. We hear a lot about that in the media. But I did want to kind of start one place. And most of you are probably not familiar with StarCraft 2. But after Google went and beat the world's best Go players, they've now recently had a go at StarCraft 2. And StarCraft 2 is quite a different game from something like Go. First of all, it's kind of like a rock, paper, scissors game. It's game theory. There's no best strategy, right? Secondly, you're dealing with imperfect information. You don't know everything. It's not like on a Go board where you can see everything. You're very much doing it with the aim of sort of planning to win the game, but you don't get direct feedback on your actions, so long-term planning. It's all done in real time. It's not turn-based, which is a huge challenge when it comes to AI. And last but not least, there's a large action space. There's a lot of different things you could be doing. Now, if you see here to the right, recently Google played some of the best players in the world and won hands down. So we can now also say AI is better than humans at playing StarCraft. That, in my opinion, is actually a bigger achievement than Go by quite a distance. And the reason why is because those kind of things begin to look a lot more like this one, right? Go is a very isolated board. When we start to deal with real-time, imperfect information, long-term planning, we begin to talk about AI that can assemble and work much more in the real world. And that's the kind of context of today's conversation, really, is that we're beginning to approach a level of AI where it can have a real impact in the world, not just on a Go board or in a chess board. It can begin to move out into a sort of much more blurry world and begin to act in that world, and in many cases and at many tasks be faster and better than us. Now, I'm not going to go deeper into what that might mean from a pure technical point of view. I want to go much more into what does it mean for us. So there's a fantastic guy called Jonathan Harris who back in 2013 wrote a kind of thing with the New York Times called Data. And this is kind of how he starts. Data will help us remember, but will it let us forget? And I think often when we sort of talk about topics like this, actually looking towards art or ideas or philosophy is kind of the only thing I have that can help me steer. And we've obviously had a lot of these, I think it's fair enough to call them scandals recently, Facebook, etc., elections. I'm not going to go too much into what we may or may not do about that in the case of Facebook. But I think from the perspective of Jonathan Harris, it's extremely important. What is AI going to mean for us as individuals? What is it going to mean for the societies that we live in? So that's the other thing I want to cover. So really the talk today is about the world, and then it's about us. And if we first jump into the world, I called it politics because there's really, when you sort of start talking about the world as a whole, it very quickly becomes about politics. So let's call it that, and I'm going to lend a bit here on a guy called Ian Hogarth who wrote an amazing essay on the geopolitics of AI recently. AI and politics, you could ask, what is that? What does that mean? Now, to give you a sort of quick background, if you think of the 8 by far largest AI companies in the world, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Apple, Alibaba, Baidu, Tencent, and ByteDance, they're all Chinese and American, by far. And not just that, but they represent a growing and growing share of their national equity markets. They are rapidly becoming by far the largest companies that those countries have as well. So they're not just growing on a sort of global importance, they're also growing importance in this kind of intersection between government and the market. And there's no doubt that both China and America are actively helping promote the agenda of these companies around the world. And that's what Ian Hogarth essentially starts talking about. And to give you a bit of an idea, China decided years ago to prioritize AI as a national strategy at the highest levels. And if you look in the last 10 years, the progress that China's made, there's a few stats here in terms of papers, which is a good kind of proxy for the involvement in the area. Chinese researchers have gone from 5% to 50% over the last 10 years. But also in terms of funding for startups, et cetera, China has really become, in many ways, the center of the AI world. If you look at the remaining 50%, a large majority of that belongs to the US. So the AI arms race, as we could call it, maybe in the words of Ian Hogarth, is really a Chinese-American affair. Now, what does that mean for the rest of us? Well, in his talk, he lays out this. Kei-Fu Lee, who's a Taiwanese venture capitalist, makes the argument that if we combine this with some of the challenges that the world has at the moment, say tax avoidance, at the moment we are simply unable to effectively tax these extremely profitable companies. And that's part of why they are so important for the national agenda of these countries. And actually, Ian and Kei-Fu Lee in their talks sort of envision a world where countries like Senegal or the UK might almost become subservient states. We might have to trade the data of our people in order to access these type of AI services. You could really think of AI as an extension of, say, the nuclear arms race, where whoever controls the AI will actually in some ways control the geopolitics of the world. Because if the populations and systems of these countries depend on these AI systems, you could really talk about, and this is not my words, but it's the words of Ian Hogarth, a new form of colonialism, a data colonialism, where data gets centered and concentrated in a few hands. This is still largely, for now, a corporate race, but he also mentions that states are beginning to get involved on a national basis. And we could very quickly see both China and the US and other countries begin to invest significant defense budget into this, which will then again help to accelerate this arms race much quicker. So I don't want to point too bleak of a view, but I do want to say that AI is becoming a very real thing in the global political agenda, and I think it's something that we haven't talked about at all, really, when it comes to AI. Often we talk about self-driving cars and things that might sort of, in the grand scheme of things, be pretty trivial compared to topics like this. So that's kind of on a society basis what I really think is the biggest challenge that we face. Do we want AI to be private? Do we want it to serve a nationalist agenda? Do we want it to maximize growth? Or do we want it to help us create a sustainable planet? Do we see AI as a utility, as a public good? Do we really think that it should be governed by individual countries, or should there be some form of transnationalist body? Ian Hogarth, at the end of his talk, imagines a kind of combined entity that mixes the best of the UN and the best of Wikipedia to kind of govern it. I don't know if I see that happening right now. I think we need to make a lot of progress in how we want to govern this from a global point of view. I think if left to individual governments, it might very well feed into the political agenda that is already going on in the world. Now, then, let's turn the sort of view to ourselves. Morality was the best word I had, but I really want to talk about us. And I want to talk about our relationship to AI. And I guess I wanted to sort of get this quote right from Nick Bostrom because I think it's a very important one to set the scene for what I'm going to talk about. The sheer complexity of human value systems makes it very difficult to make AI's motivations human-friendly, unless moral philosophy provides us with a flawless ethical theory, and AI's utility function could allow for many potential harmful scenarios that conform with a given ethical framework. Now, what Nick Bostrom's really saying is that the AIs we build are going to be no better than the ethics and morals that we give them, and our ethics and morals aren't complete. It's actually very difficult for us to describe what a sort of good action is in a given context and what the outcomes of those actions might be. Now, let's look at a particular thing from from the world that I know a lot about, which is publishing and media. I'm going to make the statement that AI has done more to change media and communication in the last 10 years than anything that's come before it. What is that, you might say? Well, you actually all engage with AI every day, right? Billions of us do. Because when we go to these platforms, YouTube, Netflix, Facebook, etc., the things that decide what we should see is an AI, right? It serves billions of people with information every day. And it makes its decisions largely based on business reasons. What will make Facebook or Google most money? Not what will be most beneficial for the users that we have, right? They're advertising-funded businesses in many cases. The one exception there is Netflix. But you can say Netflix, in a way, is kind of locked into this attention's arms race with the other companies. There's only 24 hours in a day, so all of these companies are really competing about owning as much of our day as possible. And that's a pretty brutal battle at the moment, and it's a battle where they employ all the AI tactics that they can get a hold of. Just to give you an idea, as humanity now, we spend 15 billion hours a week on these 4 platforms, right? Some of it is time well spent on things that we enjoy, but my sort of prediction is that quite a lot of that is also what we could call wasted time. Time that the systems actually lure us or trick us into spending that we might want to use on other things. So Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, he has this concept of system 1 and system 2. The assumption is that all of us humans have a kind of impulsive side to us that act in the moment. And then we have a more kind of rational and reflective self that actually has longer-term goals and dreams and plans. The thing is, it's not given which one of them win on a daily basis in any given situations. And that's where this kind of system architecture comes in. How do we make sure that these systems help us make better decisions as human beings? Now, this is a quote, and you can think for yourself if you don't know who Reed Hastings is, but the quote is, you get a show or a movie you're really dying to watch, and you end up staying up late at night, so we actually compete with sleep, and we're winning. Reed Hastings is the Netflix CEO, right? Americans now spend a staggering 72 hours a week in front of a screen. They also, on average, sleep almost an hour less per night than they did 8 years ago. So actually, in many cases, Reed Hastings is right. They are winning. They're actually out-competing sleep and other natural human needs in favor of more technology, more screen time. And I think we can't have a discussion about AI without having a discussion about the AI that's already affecting all of us. And one of the tricky things of recommender systems, which is the world I live in, the systems that decide what each person should see, is that it's a very invisible technology. I don't know, and I don't think about necessarily on a daily basis that what I see is different from what everybody else is seeing. That one of the most important questions to ask in recommender systems is, what am I not being shown? And it's one of the questions that I think most of us, even myself, although I'm deeply embedded in this, when I open up a YouTube or any of these platforms, I forget what it is I don't see. And that's why politically these kind of systems can be so dangerous, because their effect on us is long-term, and it's very subtle on a day-to-day basis, but there's no doubt that in the longer term and on a broad scale, they have massive implications for society. So that's sort of the other main point I wanted to make, and it really comes down to this. I don't know if you're familiar with Wait But Why, but this is kind of his first talk. It's a talk about procrastination, etc. And I think it just fits so well into this, right? So I'm this rational decision maker. I've got things I want to do. I'm not a child. I've got long-term plans. And then, we also have this little instant gratification monkey, right? That sits in our brain and occasionally goes, I want to do fun stuff, right? And I think one of the challenges, if we go back to Daniel Kahneman, is that these two little systems interact in our brain all the time, right? And my fear is that the impulsive self, the AIs that we've deployed in media, is largely helping our impulsive self, not our rational and long-term self. Why can't I go into YouTube and say, I would like you to show me stuff that could help me become a better person? Why is it only that AI can show me stuff that helps me spend more time on YouTube? So there's a guy called Joe Edelman who's done an amazing piece of work on what he calls metrics versus reasons when it comes to these kind of algorithms. And what he basically sets out is that all of the AI systems that are deployed in this manner at the moment are really what we call maximization systems. They look at a few metrics, and then they try to maximize the value of those metrics. Time spent for YouTube and Facebook, etc., is the dominant metric. Now, what that completely obliterates is human dreams and needs and desires. You can say it sort of flattens us and turns us into statistics. And I might have come to YouTube to learn how to play the piano, but YouTube will give me music videos and other snackable stuff it's very easy for me to diverge with. It's when I talk to teachers, it's one of the biggest challenges they have about sending their students to YouTube is that they can send the kids to YouTube for a great video, but the second the kid arrives, YouTube remembers the child, not the context, and actually tries to take them off onto another journey. So Joe Edelman is in my view, the only guy who's put forward a kind of comprehensive view of how these algorithms could be more holistic, could be more based on our reasons and dreams and aspirations, not on metrics. And I think it kind of goes into this. So this is a very shortening of the introduction to a book called Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman. And it basically kind of in the intro, I'm going to read out from this and say, in 1984, people are controlled by inflicting pain. In Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, people are controlled by inflicting pleasure. Orwell feared we would become a captive culture. Huxley feared we would become a trivial culture. And he kind of sets out this whole duality between 1984 and A Brave New World. And at the end of the intro, he says, this book is about the possibility that Huxley, not Orwell, was right. You know, what we haven't seen play out, I should say this book is written in 1985, and it's actually about cable TV, but I think it applies completely to this world too, right? What we haven't seen play out is this kind of Orwellian scenario. Or maybe we have, but maybe we're seeing that play out more in China than here or in the US. But what we see play out here is really this kind of trivial culture, right? Where more and more of us are consuming more and more content, but we're not necessarily making the moral and ethical progress that we would expect from these kind of new technologies. You can say in some ways we've taken these amazing new powerful technologies and we've really applied them to something very benign, you know, something very banal. We're not in many ways helping the world become a better place. We're really just driving more advertising revenue. So I'll return to Jonathan Harris here, and he finishes his quotes by saying, data will help us see the world as it is, but will it help us see the world as it could be? And I kind of wanted to get to the end here and say that this is really when I was asked to talk about sort of morality and ethics of AI, I couldn't help think about us. And I couldn't help think about that Nick Bostrom quote about how if we can't come up with a good value and ethics-driven system for what we want these systems to do, if we can't tell them what good and bad is and what it's like, and we can't come up with an effective way, both on an individual and a societal basis, to govern that, it's going to be an extremely difficult task in the next 5 to 10 years to roll out AI, and it will roll out, but to roll out it in a way where we make sure that it benefits societies and it benefits individuals all around the world. That it doesn't repeat the same challenges that we've seen with most other transformative technologies. And I think that's something that we all have to come together to address, and it's something that hopefully can make it relevant to each of us as individuals, not just as a political subject or as a subject we read about when we read about Tesla or Uber putting self-driving cars on the road. There are lots of other challenges, job creation, all those kind of things. But I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to, can we instill some kind of sense in these systems of what behavior we want and we don't want? And so I kind of wanted to end with a with a conundrum. And you know, it's quite popular in kind of ethics discussions about AI to kind of have these thought experiments. And what I haven't touched on today at all is the kind of classics topics in morality and ethics of AI. You know, should a self-driving car be able to save one person? And you know, if it means saving more people, should it be allowed to kill one person, etc. Those kind of specific robo-ethic questions we've stayed a little bit away from today. But I wanted to introduce one, right? Let's say we built this amazing AI, and it actually is a utility AI. It is able to see the world for what it is. and we've instilled a perfect sense of judgment in it, that it is truly good. It wants to protect life. And this AI gets deployed, and it looks at the world, and it realizes that if it doesn't do something, humans are going to destroy the world. Should it destroy us? Would we program it in a way that it would allow the AI to save the world, but not us? That is sort of one of the ultimate ethical and moral questions, right? And I wanted to end there to illustrate how difficult a topic ethics and morality is, because it might not be beneficial to us. It might be beneficial to a greater good than just us as individuals. And I think that's where when we run through these thought experiments in AI and ethics and morals, come into challenges all the time. The classic one is in the AI one, right? Where an AI is driving a car that I'm in, and you ask people, should it be allowed to kill the driver to save 8 children on the road, right? And 95% of people say yes. Then you ask the follow-up question and said, would you drive a car that would be allowed to kill you? And then only 10% of people say yes, right? So that's where I want to end, is I don't think we've at all begun to address morals and ethics in AI in a way that's useful for the people who are building these systems. And I think it's a domain that up until now has been very dominated by technology people. And my kind of appeal from today is really that we need to get people from a much wider range of subjects involved in the work around AI. We need people from various humanist disciplines to come in and really have these tough conversations about the technology that we're about to roll out. Because it will be a general purpose technology. It will change the world in the next 10 to 20 years. But I don't think it's a given how it's going to change the world. So thank you very much for listening.